Hi, I'm Devoki, and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and today I'm going to be doing just kind of like a general recap, I guess, of sorts. One of the things that I've come to accept over the last year or two on BookTube is that I just really don't like making monthly wrap-ups. I have complained about this before. I have no good reason for it. There is nothing like in monthly wrap-ups that I explicitly hate doing. I think they're great videos. I like watching other people's monthly wrap-ups, but for some reason, I just don't enjoy making them, and so I've almost basically completely stopped doing them. Though it's kind of weird because I also have like similar feelings with TBRs and hauls. Those are videos that like on their own I usually don't really do that often because I just don't really like get a lot out of making them. Except weirdly, like now that I've started doing these like semi-regular library check-in videos, which are essentially a haul, a TBR, and a wrap-up, like all combined, like all three videos that on their own for some reason I hate making. For some reason they are a lot of fun in the context of library check-ins. So I don't know. There is no sense of consistency to this. There is no inner logic. It's just for some reason I can do wrap-ups in that one context and like I don't really do them that much in any other setting right now, I guess. I don't know, whatever. That's not the point of this video. Even though I don't like doing monthly wrap-ups, I do kind of want to mess around with just like trying out a sort of like monthly check-in video every month this year. We'll see. We're gonna see how it goes past this initial video, but the goal is just to kind of check in with where I'm at with like books and TV and whatever my pop culture, whatever situation is or has been in general for that month. I don't know what this type of video is gonna look like on a month-to-month basis. Maybe it will always look similar to this kind of video. Maybe it will change with each month and whatever thing I want to talk about. Also, maybe I will only do it this month and be like, this was dumb, I'm never gonna do it again. But for now, I'm just gonna do it because I don't know, January happened and I have a few random things that I want to talk about, but don't want to make a whole video about any single one of those things. For this month, there are 3 things that I want to talk about in my recap of sorts. The first is going to be about like how I've been able to finally start listening to more audio again. The second is going to be about me becoming more of a sports person, or at least trying to. And the last thing, the third thing, is going to be some thoughts that I've had about the Devabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. That discussion is going to be pretty spoilery, and it's going to relate to things that happened in January in America, in politics, and the riots at the Capitol building. So I am saving that for the end. So let's start off with my first thing, which is about me listening to more audio. A thing I talked about towards the end of last year, I think, was like how I have been listening to a lot fewer podcasts than I used to, which was kind of a bummer. It's just that like a few years ago, I was doing more commuting. I was doing more of the kind of work that made it easy to like multitask by listening to podcasts. Whereas now a lot of my work is at a computer with writing, which is very difficult for me to do while listening to someone else talking. And also I don't commute, and that started before the pandemic. I've been working from home for a little bit of a while now. So the fact that I haven't had a commute has made it difficult. But then with the pandemic, also like other places where I would be listening to podcasts and audiobooks, like, you know, maybe driving to the gym or like actually lifting at the gym and stuff like that, you know, those opportunities haven't been around. And so like my podcast listening had gone down a lot over the past few years. And I'm pretty sure I said this like very close to the end of last year. And I was very much like, you know, maybe I'm just like at a point where, you know, podcasts don't fit in, and that's fine. Like, you know, sometimes you move on to other things and that's okay. But then of course, like as soon as January hit, for some reason, there's like a switch in my brain where these things just very quickly switched around, and I am now getting back into the habit of listening to podcasts more, which I'm really, really excited about, because it's also not just podcasts, it's also audiobooks, which is a thing that I have been wanting to like do more of. I think there's a few key things that have like gotten me to be able to listen to podcasts again more frequently. One of them is just like the way that I work out has changed. Like I mentioned earlier, like I used to listen to podcasts while I was lifting at the gym, and at the beginning of 2020, I had decided to start doing more yoga in place of lifting, and that was because originally, before I knew what was going to happen, I had a pretty busy travel year planned out for 2020 because of work stuff. And so I was like, you know, yoga is a thing that I can easily take with me on the go. And of course, that did not pan out at all. But one of the things that was great about yoga in the beginning of the pandemic is that even though like, yeah, I wasn't like traveling, like you could still do yoga at home, and it was a really good initial way of like adjusting to working out from home and having to kind of do my own thing in the space and with the equipment that I had available to me. But towards the end of 2020, I was really missing like lifting stuff. Like I used to do powerlifting a lot more, and I did CrossFit and stuff in grad school, and I was really missing that kind of like intensity in my workouts. And so I ordered a bunch of dumbbells, figured out, like went to Rogue Fitness, got my dumbbells, found some YouTubers whose videos I really liked, and I've been doing Carolyn Gervon's workouts on YouTube, and they've been a lot of fun. I'm not gonna, it's not about advertising her videos, but I've been doing her Epic program, and I'm just about to complete that and move on to the second Epic program, and I mean, the whole point, if you want to ask me specific questions about this workout series, I am happy to answer them. But obviously, the point of this video is not to tell you about my workouts. The point is that one of the things I appreciate about the way this one YouTuber does her videos, and there are other fitness YouTubers who do this similarly, where they have some music and they have the timer and they have beeps for the timers and whatever. But they themselves do not usually do any voiceover, and that makes it possible, if you're like me, to put some podcasts on and listen to that, as long as you can just hear the timer in the background. Or sometimes I'll set a timer separately on my phone that I can set at a louder volume so that I can follow along. So that has been a really good way for me to just set aside a chunk of time for me to listen to more podcasts. I've also started trying to do some more walks, even though it's cold and snowy and whatever right now, just because otherwise I do not get fresh air. And so that has been another way that I have been getting my podcast listening in. And I think it's been one of the reasons why I'm glad I'm doing this just in general, is because it helps me check in with the news in a much better way. I am at my worst knowledge-wise when I rely on Twitter to give me my news. And I think the podcast that I've probably been following the longest, probably almost a decade. I don't know. It hasn't even been around that long. Probably. It's been around for a while, but I've been following the BBC Global News podcast for a very long time, just because they just package their news very well in a podcast format. And they think they come out twice a day. And so for me, it's been helpful just over the course of a very long set of years. When I listen to that podcast regularly, I am so much better informed about things, just because having that consistency of this one news outlet and how they cover their whatever their subjects are. It isn't by no means perfect and by no means comprehensive, and I would never advocate following only one source, but having one source that I'm following regularly is just so much better than when I just try to sporadically pick up on news from whatever links people are talking about on Twitter or whatever. That's one reason why I'm really glad that I'm listening to podcasts again. But also, I mentioned with audiobooks, I've started instituting a rule for myself where if I am sewing, I have to listen to an audiobook. So that's included Milkman by Anna Burns, which I've been listening to that audiobook for a year now, because I started reading the physical book first, and then I had to return my copy to the library, but I was really, really enjoying it. But it's just such a dense, slow read for me, at least the way that I read it, because it has such a stream of consciousness flow to it, where you kind of just got to be able to kind of follow along and just I don't know, enjoy the ride, but you can't speed through it. So listening to the audiobook, the narrator is really good, and so I've been listening to that audiobook for a very long period of time and just haven't finished it, which is by no means a comment on the book, because like I said, I have really been enjoying it. But getting back into okay, if I am sewing, which I've been doing more of to make some masks and whatnot, that has been a good way to get myself to listen to the audiobook. And so yeah, it's just been nice to get back into audio. I don't have some grand epiphany about audio or podcasting in general, but podcasts is part of how I got interested in multimedia kind of writing stuff as a career, because I was listening to it all the time in grad school, and then I just always love that feeling of that connection with a speaker, or when you're listening to people having a conversation. I love that feeling of you feel you're almost in the room with them, that kind of very podcasty thing. And so it's just been good to kind of reintroduce that into my life. So next up is a discussion that none of you asked for, about how I'm attempting to become a sports person, or at least someone who watches sports. I have nothing against sports in general. I grew up playing sports. I played volleyball and ran track. I played volleyball and ran track. I keep saying track. I played volleyball and I ran track through college. So I've done sports. I also would watch sports with the World Cup and the Olympics and stuff. I would check in for those big events. But when it comes to I don't know, having any kind of sports allegiance or loyalty or dedication to following I don't know, a sport over a season. I have had none of that. I did not grow up in a family that rooted for any particular team in anything. And like, I just like don't see myself as someone who has ever thought of like having an emotional investment in a group of other people over an extended period of months as something that like would be fun to me. And like, as someone who is like not a sports person, one of the things that was like fun about living in Boston as that kind of person who's just like very agnostic to like the whole thing, is that when like a good Boston sports thing happens and everyone around you is excited, like you get to be excited with them. And then when a bad Boston sports thing happens, you get to be excited for like everybody else in the country. Like it always feels a little bit win-win, which I know is not in any way, shape, or form like a good declaration of allegiance to the place that I was living in or anything. But again, I was like, I don't care about the sports team. Like the extent to which I cared about sports is that like the Red Sox, like my lab was right next to Fenway, and so like because of the Red Sox, if they played past the season, I guess, like the T would still be crowded through the rest of the year. And so for me, it was always like, cool, if their season ends when I think it's supposed to end, that is good for me. And that is not a thing you're gonna say out loud in Boston, but like it would feel good to me at the time. But also like sports allegiances are also not just like about where you live. Like my husband is an Arsenal fan, and one of the things that like having known him now for this long period of time, one of the things that I've learned from him is that like you shouldn't do that to yourself. Like watching someone who I think of as a deeply rational person just like subject themselves on a weekly basis to this enormous amount of stress just like has made me realize like I don't want that for myself. And yet for some reason this year in 2021, I have decided that I am going to watch a sport. Like that is what I have called it. It is Project Watch a Sport. And I blame this on two things. Well, three things if you include the pandemic and the incessant need for any semblance of newness in this year. But I also feel like we should kind of just accept that as like a default reason for anything at this point. So thing one, and this is like the one thing making this like vaguely book related, I've been consuming a bunch of sports adjacent media. So that's included a bunch of like sports romances as well as Ted Lasso. I thought that I had beaten Apple TV because we got the free trial to watch Ted Lasso, binged it all in one day, and I was like, cool, I can stop this free trial and I have watched the show that I've wanted to watch for free. Except that Apple TV got the last laugh because now we have subscribed to Apple TV solely to rewatch Ted Lasso. And for some reason, there's just something about like having consumed these like fictional sports things that has made me curious about actual sports. And to be clear, I am very much aware that like the fantasy of like sports in romance and like the wholesomeness of Ted Lasso has like very little to do with actual sports and how it is like done in the world and all of the stuff that is both good and bad about them. But I think those like fictional stories and combined with like the real life actual stories that you can see in like documentaries and sports writing and magazines and all of this stuff, like they've all made me just very curious about the world of sports, like the business side, the team side, the management side, like all of these different things, like how they all intersect and like all revolve around these different games. And I think all of that has just like built up my appreciation for just like what a reality TV show sports is, which is appropriate because I think thing number two that has really gotten me into sports or made me want to get into sports is MTV's The Challenge, which is it's very, very, very long running reality TV show featuring a bunch of reality TV people. I think it used to be like people from Real World and they've now branched out and it's like people from Survivor and Big Brother, but ostensibly at some point right now it's basically just like people who are professionally just on the challenge at different points. Like they're on some years, they're off some years, but like their job, I think at this point is basically just being on the challenge. And when they're there, they are doing like these very, very intense physical challenges and some like slightly less intense mental challenges to win a bunch of money. And so there's all of this stuff around the gameplay because there are all these political elements, it's a reality TV show. There's eliminations, there's like voting, there's betrayals, there's love, there's all of this stuff. There's alcohol, there's all of it. And so, it is the most reality TV version of a sport. And I started watching The Challenge because Nicole from Sweeney Says, whenever she and I like talk about reality TV shows, I think like every reality TV person, they have their key reference point, like the one show that they reference more than any other reality TV show. Like if they've watched a lot of reality TV, like we all have our go-tos. For me, it's usually Vanderpump Rules. For Nicole, I think it's The Challenge. And so I was very, very curious about it based on what she said and this very long history that there is going into it and like all of the different relationships and stuff. So that was why I started watching, and like it was very exciting because I started telling her like, hey, I'm watching the season, and she started giving me the full Wikipedia entry of like these characters and their relationships and all of these long histories. It's just been a lot of fun, and I very much get why people are super into it. And like I guess technically sports leagues and MTV are different things, but also I don't know that they really are. There's a lot of similarities I'm starting to feel like between them. And so I think like watching the challenge, like, and again, just like that incredible desire for newness of like anything that just feels remotely novel at this point, even if it's sports, which is not novel at all, but it is in my life. It's been just kind of nice to like go from like the challenge and being like, huh, it's kind of fun to watch like all of the strategy play out and like kind of try to dissect all of that stuff and how people play things and just watch strong people really be strong at each other or something, you know, and carry that over into sports. I think I've decided for now that my focus is on becoming a hockey fan because I think it's just bonkers as a sport. It makes no sense. There's nothing logical about it, and I love that. It's pure chaos on ice, especially the fact that it's chaos on ice. Like, it is already chaos, and the fact that someone was like, hey, what if we took this chaos and like added ice? Or actually, really, I mean, that's it. Actually what happened is someone saw ice and was like, what if we chaosed on it? And that's what happened. That's what hockey is, I think. And I feel like I have no understanding of what's going on in the game, but I am fascinated every time I watch. So that is where I am at right now with sports fandoms. I have literally no allegiance to any team whatsoever. I just want to watch them do things. Okay, so now we're gonna get to the actual book thing that I wanted to talk about for this month, which is the Devabad trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. And what you could consider either like the best or the worst timing that I had in actually deciding to finish this series. Like I said in the beginning of this video, this is going to be a spoilery set of thoughts because I cannot talk about what I want to talk about with this book without having it be a spoiler. The Devabad trilogy starts with City of Brass, where we meet Nari. She's this con woman in Cairo who then gets sucked into this like whole magical world of Devabad, thanks in part to this guy she meets, Dara, who is mysterious but turns out to have like this whole secret awful past where it turns out that he like killed a bunch of people but it was to save other people. Like there's a whole lot of like violence and cycles of violence happening between factions in this magical world. And over the course of the trilogy, we're watching Nari gain power, we're watching Dara deal with the consequences of his previous actions, but also get drawn into a new battle for power between Nari and her mother, who is basically using Dara for her own like nefarious aims. And in particular, book 2 and book 3 involve like a violent insurrection that then carries over into more violence, which is like not at all surprising in the context of these books. This is a whole series that is built on cycles of violence that have happened before the events of the book and that continues through the trilogy. So like this is like a thing that I knew when I was reading it at the time I was reading it, which is important because I started the last book, Empire of Gold, around January 6th, which is when the riots led by a bunch of Trump supporters happened at the Capitol building. And I think I was like maybe midway through the book when I kind of had that feeling of like, it's a bit weird to be reading a book about, you know, the violent insurrection in support of an authoritarian leader, you know, at this time. And it turned out to be true. It was weird. And what really stuck with me in like the week since was Dara's storyline in this whole series, where like in the third book we've got Nari's mother who's been like just massacring people for like pages upon pages, and like we're fully like at Marvel levels of like damage. We're like at this point like the body count is like off screen because it's just excessive. And Dara has been supporting her because she's his leader, but like he's also been kind of mopey and sad about all this killing for like maybe a book and a half because he's been kind of like feeling like, like maybe killing is bad, but he doesn't know what to do, and she keeps escalating and escalating, and it's really only at the most like dramatically appropriate time that he actually tries to stop her. And I'm glossing over a lot of what happens to Dara over the course of these books because he does like become mentally enslaved, and there's also like a lot of very legitimate trauma that is a part of his story. But I'm also glossing over a lot of moments where like there are characters discussing genocide and he's like, wait, isn't that bad? And that's like kind of the extent to which he like, I don't know, is like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. But against that backdrop of like that week in January and like what it's been like in the country since then, and like all of this narrative around like we need to heal and whatever, thinking about Dara just like makes me mad. Because when I think of him and I think of like specific moments in his logic, like I think of all of the people who were like, I thought Trump would never be this bad, or like, this is not who we are. You know, those kinds of comments that are very dismissive and very ignorant of like the fact that like, yes, a lot of this is who we are. And like, yes, he told us that he would be this bad. And especially when this comes from people who have enabled him throughout his presidency, who have enabled him throughout his false claims of election fraud, and who will continue to enable him throughout any attempt to have him like face consequences for his actions. The complete lack of any like moral courage or backbone, it's maddening. And like when you have people who are like, you know, I never thought it was going to be this bad, or like, this is the step that was too far or something. And then you look back on like the last 4 years of like, you know, the Muslim ban, you know, the family separations, the like lack of like empathy and support for Black Lives Matter, the COVID death toll, all of these things, like it's all just so very much like, this is the thing that was too far. There's very much that sense of like, what was too far? Like, what did it take for it to finally become too far? It just all of that response feels like so little, so late. In terms of the Devabad trilogy, this mostly has nothing to do with Dara. Like, for one, he is a fictional character. He is not a politician. And also within the context of his own story, there are a lot of like mitigating factors that make him very different from like a bunch of self-serving racist politicians. You know, he's dealing with things like magical enslavement and a multi-century legacy of violence and trauma. I may not always like his story or even agree with the way it's employed, but I do understand its trajectory in the context of the book. But I also can't let go of the context that I read these books in. When I think back on the series and I remember it, I'm probably always going to end up thinking about the riots and Trump and the people who enabled him. And even though this fictional character had nothing to do with enabling this very real president, I'm still kind of always gonna be mad at him. So yeah, I guess maybe I should not have ended this on a bummer of a note, but I guess like January was like already a year of a month and we've still got the rest of 2021 to go. So hopefully it goes much better than this. And so hopefully you're all staying as safe and healthy as you can. So thank you guys for watching, and bye.